welcome back to Board Online, Board Offline. We're going to be starting up a new series here. This one is going to be for Dungeon Command. Dungeon Command, Blood of Gruumsh is the game we're going to be doing this time. This is the Orc. This is the Orc faction pack for the Dungeon Command series. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, Dungeon Command has, I believe, 5 different faction packs. And basically, in a pack, you get a single army. And it's really designed for one player to have one pack, one player to have another faction pack, and then you fight against each other. However, if you want to, there is a way to play the one faction pack against each other, but it's a much smaller game, not nearly as fun. We'll be going through the Orc faction pack today with the components, taking a look at all of that. What you're going to find inside is some tiles for the board, a dozen pre-painted miniatures that are actually very detailed. They're very nice miniatures, so that's a big plus, and a few other things. So let's get inside and I'll show you what's going on. So here's what you're going to get in the box. I would like to go in and point out with the box itself, it is not particularly good. I mean, you can see how thin this is just on the video. It is not a very good quality box. You can see right here, I mean, I take pretty good care of my games, and it is already starting to tear right there. Just from standard, you know, being on the shelf, standard use. So the box itself is pretty much straight garbage. The rule book, you know, it's a rule book as far as there's nothing particularly special about the quality of it. I will say it's pretty well laid out as far as the rules themselves go. There's a lot of artwork in here. They do a good job in the rule book of when they give you a rule, they then also give you an example to go with it. And the diagrams are pretty clear. The explanation of what the diagram's showing you, it's all very clear. So I do like that about the rule book. It's certainly a lot better than some rule books that I've seen as far as the level of detail that it goes into explaining different cards, or not specific cards necessarily, but the ideas behind the cards and the nomenclature and the different symbols. We'll get to the figures in a minute because, as you can see, they are pre-painted, which is great. But let's take a look at some of these tokens first. These right here are going to be your damage tokens. They come in 10 and 50. And, I mean, you can see it's pretty thick cardboard. I've had no problems with them, any sort of damage to them. They popped out of the cardboard, you know, the punch out real well. None of them tore or anything like that. So as far as cardboard tokens go, those are good quality. These right here are just to keep, you got 1 through 8. They're just to keep track if you end up with multiple of the same type of creature on the board. You can keep track of which one is which. These right here are your treasure tokens for when you find treasure. The only thing treasure does in this game is increase your morale, but that's important because that's essentially the equivalent of your hero's life in this game. So these right here are the initial treasure tokens you'll see on the board, and you flip them over and you find, okay, this one's going to have 2 treasure underneath it. You know, which is where you then put 2 of these onto the board. Again, same quality of cardboard there. Nothing spectacular, but it's very, very adequate for the purposes for this game. These right here are just markers you'll use to keep track of morale and leadership in the game, and you'll slide them up and down the card. As far as that goes, you know, I have had games where, you know, the table gets bumped pretty hard, and you end up knocking them off of whichever number they're on, and so then you're trying to remember where you were, what your morale was, what your leadership was. You know, I guess that's something that just kind of happens when you're keeping track of your life or your, you know, whatever your statistic is that way. But I do know a lot of games have methods that keep those tokens better placed on the cards or whatever you're using. So that might have been nice to see. These are your heroes that come with the game. You got Drogar, Eye of Gruumsh here, and you can see that his special power is that creatures he controls ignore difficult terrain, which can be very, very useful. There's a lot of different spots on the board where, you know, the difficult terrain might actually have a significant effect on what you're able to do. And then here you have Lokar of the Stonelands. So at the beginning of the game with Lokar, when you're deploying your initial creatures before the game starts, he allows you to deploy one of those initial creatures in an unoccupied treasure square, which basically means you start off the game already able to obtain extra morale, which is definitely a good thing. As far as the board itself goes, you can see these are pretty much the same quality. If any of you have played Wrath of Ashardalon, Legend of Drizzt, or Castle Ravenloft, the D&D adventure system, that's the quality of cardboard we're looking at here. It's got the same, puzzle piece connections, so it's not, they stay together. You're not sliding over, with a game like Mansions of Madness. If you hit the board, then everything kind of comes apart. With this one, it stays together. You can also see on one side you have an indoor setting, and on the other side you have an outside setting. It's basically the only real difference is just whatever your preference is. There's different terrain features on the inside versus the outside, as you can see. And when you're setting the board up, I've got it set up in a pretty standard pattern here, but there's no real set way to do it. You can, do something where this is up here, and and this one starts here. Anything you want to do, as long as the connections make sense with the walls. You do something like this, you might end up with a long hallway where it's just this tight, real close quarters combat going on. A lot of cool different ways you can set that up. And on the board itself, you see some different symbols here. This square symbol indicates that this is going to provide cover, which blocks line of sight, all kinds of stuff like that. This kind of triangle, ninja star looking thing indicates hazardous terrain. So if you end your turn in there, you're going to end up taking some damage. Also, this circle is going to be a treasure location, so that's where the game would start with a piece right there, and at a certain point you flip it over, see, oh, there's 2 treasure there, and then you could use some actions to take the treasure. And finally, the triangle indicates difficult terrain, meaning it just takes a little more effort to get across. All right, every box of Dungeon Command comes with the creature cards. Each one has 12 creatures, so you've got a Orc Chieftain, Orc Drudge, Orc Barbarian. It's some really interesting creatures in here. So the creature cards, you can see the artwork. I really like the artwork on these. All these creatures are either, obviously going to have special powers or have their own particular uses. For instance, the Ogre, when you deploy him, you gain 1 morale. Basically the troops are, emboldened by seeing this guy finally show up. And he is a beast. He is difficult to deal with for sure. So that's the creature cards. And here you've got your order cards, which are spells and all kinds of actions. And they're broken up into 3 different kinds. You've got your standard, immediate, and minor orders in here. Or then with Victorious Surge, you make a melee attack that deals 20 damage. That creature then heals 20 damage. A lot of cool things in here. With Tactical Block, prevent 30 damage from this creature from one source and untap this creature. Unexpected Resistance, prevent 10 damage to this creature from one source. Choose one adjacent tapped creature. That creature's controller loses 1 morale. So there's all kinds of ways to mess with the opponent where you don't see things coming, because the immediate actions can actually occur on the opponent's turn. Again, the artwork in here is similar. Doesn't always make a whole lot of sense. So this is the Orc faction pack, and sometimes you'll see these cards where the card is describing the orcs doing something that's beneficial, but in the picture, the orcs are getting destroyed. Which, so sometimes there's things that don't make sense. It's more the idea of the card they were going for with these, with this artwork. But it is what it is. I guess that's kind of a minor issue, for instance, right here with the Vorpal sword. You know, it looks to me like it's not an orc that's got the sword, not even an orc in the picture, even though this goes with the orc faction pack. So keep that in mind. It's not a big problem. One other final thing is, as far as the cards go, you do get, for each of the creatures in this pack, you get a D&D Adventure monster card. So if you have Wrath of Asharline, Legend of Drizzt, Castle Ravenloft, all these creatures can then be shuffled into those monster decks and used in any of those games, which, you know, that's always, that's really cool. You're basically getting an expansion for those games while also getting a game to play on its own. Now let's take a look at some of these miniatures that come with the game. So here you got your Orc Archer. He's a pretty standard ranged combat unit. He's not doing anything special, but you keep him at a distance, and obviously he's going to pick apart your opponent. You get 2 of those with the set. This right here is your Wereboar. He's going to have Death Strike, so when he gets killed, if he's within melee, you know, if he's standing next to an opponent, that opponent's going to take some final damage as this guy goes out. Here's your Orc Cleric. Whenever he gets into play, you're going to be able to draw an order card, which the more, you know, there's no maximum hand size for your order cards, so the more of those you can get in your hand, the more versatility you're going to have on the battlefield. All right, here's your Orc Chieftain. And I really like that sword and the armor on this guy. I mean, he's one of the cooler looking miniatures in the game, I think. And what happens with this guy, when you deploy him, you're able to then deploy another orc or another creature of level 3 or lower that's already in your hand. You gain some leadership, which then helps get more creatures out the next turn. So this guy, you know, thematically makes a lot of sense. Here's your basic orc unit right here. An Orc Drudge. He's pretty weak. He's just there kind of as cannon fodder. Get him in the way. He's not going to do a whole lot of damage unless you pump him up with some of your order cards or something. But he's there. So this right here is your Boar. It also has Death Strike just like the Wereboar. So he'll be doing some damage as he dies to anybody next to him. Here's your Orc Barbarian. Whenever an enemy creature dies, he's going to be untapped. So that's certainly useful. And, I mean, look at this guy. There's another one I'm a big fan of. I mean, that axe, the armor. I don't know. I think this is another one that's really cool. This is your Orc Druid. And this guy basically acts as like a summoning portal, because anytime you summon or deploy, I should say, a beast or an elemental, and this guy's on the board, you can, instead of putting it in your starting space, you can place that creature that you just deployed next to your druid. And here's your ogre. Now, when this guy shows up, I mean, you can see this guy looks mean, and he is mean. He is a tough one to fight against. When he shows up, your army automatically gains 1 morale, which, as I said before, is essentially your life in the game. And he shows up and just starts wreaking some havoc. Finally, you've got the owlbear, who's also no slouch. This guy is tough to fight. He'll do some damage. That's our components review for Dungeon Command Blood of Gruumsh. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not a huge D&D guy, so I'm sure I'll hear about it if I'm not. One thing I didn't mention in the video and I wanted to point out, I do have all my cards sleeved, as you may have seen in some other videos. The cards that come with this are actually pretty thin. So that is one other complaint I have with it. The box is complete and total garbage. And then these cards are very thin, so you probably, if you don't sleeve your games normally, you probably would want to sleeve this one, because it would not take very long at all for some wear and tear to occur on these. With that being said, thanks again for watching. Leave any comments you've got in the YouTube comments below. Be sure to tune in next time where we'll do our rules overview for Dungeon Command. And until next time, remember, if you're bored online, board offline.